Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video we'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 7 of the anime series Toaru Hikuushi no Koiuta. And effectively, the battle is on in this episode. As we begin, we hear the air raid sirens blaring, and all of the pilot fighters, the knights, are sent off to take on this contingent of the Sky Clan. You know, essentially there are a lot of old, rickety airships, wooden and everything like that. They really look very frail and beat up, and I mean missiles that are being fired by, you know, the characters we're following, the good guys essentially, are passing through the rickety wood of these old barges rather than destroying the ships. They're just missing them entirely. And it's fascinating to me where, you know, sort of the trainees are left hanging in this episode. We have a slew of them basically being put on recon. They're meant to fly around and try to spot enemy forces, whereas our main sort of, you know, characters, Kal-El, Ariel, his sister, Ignacio, Claire, Cruz, are all kept on the sidelines. They are kept away from any potential dangers, and what's more, you even have the sort of nanny, caregiver woman, or overseer woman of Claire coming and getting her and Ignacio. We find out that that is why Ignacio is here to begin with. He's been sort of hired by this woman to be Claire's bodyguard for fear of any dangers, you know, coming harm to her, whether that be Kal-El's, you know, sort of stumbling on the fact that she's Nina Viento, really, you know, when she wears the sort of white wig and she is supposed to be this wind waker and everything like that, but she doesn't even have this ability anymore, so she's basically being made to be a figurehead, as she herself surmises as they're being driven away. And so it's very interesting to me. But of course, the recon plane we end up following the most is that of Chiharu and Midi, who in the last episode really just stood out to me as far as, you know, these were sort of background characters we were finally following, finally being put on the front lines, and they were much more put on the front lines in this episode because, of course, as the Isla fleet is taking out this rickety barge-filled contingent of the Sky Clan, sure enough, you know, Midi ends up spotting this whole other contingent. It's much more, you know, futuristic aircraft. An aircraft carrier is even among them. They're all steel. They're not made of wood and everything like that. And this is a force to be reckoned with. The problem is the Knights are still flying around looking for enemy forces. They have a sense that there's more out there, and they don't know where to look. So you have Midi and Chiharu basically having to sort of discuss it. They're kind of playfully talking about, oh, well, everyone's probably missing us back home, thinking, hope they come home safe and it'll all be okay and all this stuff. But they're kind of doing that as a means to an end to get around to the point of saying we should use our flares and let our forces know where these people are. It's their job, and they know that. It's their responsibility to help their homeland, Isla, and help their home forces. And so, reluctant though it may be, it seems as though Chiharu is the one who's the deciding factor. Midi has already had this in mind. He's been mulling it over, but he's really been afraid and not sure what to do. And finally, Chiharu looks back at him and says, let's fire the flare. Let's get our forces over here, you know, to impact the enemy forces. And sure enough, they start firing a bunch of flares. They bring the entire enemy fleet under awareness of their position. They end up luckily signaling all of their ships and everything, so there is a climactic sort of air battle dogfight going on between the good and the bad, if you will, if you want to see it that way, the opposing forces in any case. And this is where Chiharu's sort of piloting skills come to full mast, because essentially she has to outrun many enemy fighters. The entire enemy fleet has locked on their position and is firing at them. And so through the course of this, even though they are evading pretty successfully the enemy forces, Midi ends up being wounded a couple of times and starts to realize, I'm not going to make it out of this alive. So he essentially wants to save Chiharu, this girl he's fallen in love with at this point. He basically admits that to himself. And he says, I want to look good for her. I want to do something for her and let her live, you know, save her, essentially, make sure she gets back home. All the meanwhile to this, we also flash back to sort of the home forces, and we find out that the two teachers, Banderas and Sonia, they don't want their kids, in trouble. They don't want this recon crew of only 2 people to be lost. So, kind of against all rules, they're stealing a plane, and they're going to go save them if they can. But as we see, Midi ends up convincing Chiharu to use her eject button, use her parachute, and he does save her life, and within seconds after she's sort of falling with this parachute open down below him, the plane is shot down, explodes with him in the pilot's seat. And so we see Midi taken out effectively, in a very sacrificial manner, very honorable manner. And he went out with a smile. He went out the way he wanted to, in a sense. And I was pretty surprised at myself just a few seconds after that, when, of course, the 2 teachers show up, and they end up flying right under Chiharu and saving her life, not letting her fall to the ground, all that, so many thousands of feet up in the air. And Banderas basically says he was a true pilot, Midi, and Chiharu breaks down finally in that moment. And I actually really did get misty-eyed, because seeing Midi actually go out in such a sacrificial and hopeful way really did hit me a little harder than I thought it would. But from that point on, of course, we see that the sort of more well-to-do cast of trainee pilots, they're going to go and they're going to help. They don't really care about being told not to. They're going to hop in their planes and they're going to go. And we leave off with Kal-El, his sister Ariel, Wolfgang, and his partner resolving, we're going to go too. If they're going to go, we're going to go too. We have to get into the action. We have to do our bit. And so that's where we leave off, as I say. And it's going to be amazing to see who comes out of this alive, when the revelations of everyone's real sort of personas come into effect, if they are able to. And otherwise, that'll be it for me. I hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you later. Peace.